Good everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So today we will be talking about Apex programming. Apex is one of the important topic you need to understand. You need to know how to work with Apex before you go and attempt Platform Dev 1. Or even if you're not planning to take Platform Developer 1, and if you're planning to look for a career in Salesforce as a Salesforce developer, right? You need to know Apex, Visual Force, and JavaScript and HTML, CSS. So for today, we will focus only on Apex. So you might wonder what Apex is all about, right? So Apex is a object-oriented language, and it's similar to Java. If you're someone from a C# background, right, you will find it comfortable to work with Apex as well. Or if you're someone from C++ background, you will find it easier as well. Or if you're someone from Delphi background, you will find it easier as well to work with Apex. That being said, if you're not comfortable with any of the programming language, then I'm afraid this part of the content will be a bit advanced for you because the basic expectation for any professional to before you take a platform dev certification is to have some foundation on programming. You need to know what classes are, what do you mean by an object, concepts of inheritance, polymorphism, data encapsulation. These things are good to know, because I won't be covering this because I will go with an assumption that you already know this stuff, right? So my target will be to focus on Apex, right? So Apex is a bit different than a usual programming language in the sense that Apex is compiled and saved in the cloud, right? So for instance, if you take an example of C#, right, you have Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, right, and you can write your code, compile it in your local desktop and do whatever with it, right? Whereas in Apex, because it's a multi-tenant architecture, being Salesforce being a multi-tenant architecture, Apex is multi-tenant aware, right? But that being said, it's very friendly and nice and beautiful language, and it's case insensitive. So if you are someone who get annoyed with the case sensitive part of a programming language, like for instance C# is a case sensitive language. If you're coming from Delphi background, right? So it's not a case sensitive language. So you will find it much easier to work with Apex as well, right? One more thing I wanted to talk about, the Apex that usually when you work with Apex, right? Apex is very closely connected to the database. So we have a concept called triggers in Salesforce, which is similar to your database trigger. If you're someone who comes from Oracle or SQL Server background, or the triggers, before insert, after insert. So we have similar kind of concept in Salesforce as well, and you will be writing triggers using your Apex code. So that's the beauty of it, right? You will have control over an object, and you will get code completion, intelligence. Rather than, you can use select star, sorry, not select star, select ID from and put in the codes. You can do that, but, when you have object mapping facility in Apex, right? Why not use it? Okay. All right. So let's dive into org. So the first thing first, right? You need to log into your Salesforce developer account, or you can log into your sandbox, but please don't mess with your production org, right? Okay. So you can use developer console, or if you're not if you think that developer console is yucky for whatever reason, that's fine. I mean, you can use Visual Studio Code or Eclipse, right? For all my demonstration, I'll be using developer console. I use developer console. I love developer console because I use Visual Studio only for C# development I don't, or sometimes for C++, but I don't want to use Visual Studio for to Studio Code for Apex, because when you have a developer console, right, and why bother with something else, right? I mean, that's my opinion. If you are someone who loves Visual Studio Code, please feel free to use that, okay? So to log into developer console, go to this gear cog icon, right? And it will take you to the developer console here. And so I'll just give you some somewhat brief introduction to this interface. So we have, as you see, that it's pretty basic looking interface, right? Nothing fancy about it here. You have file where you can open Apex class or Apex trigger, as I mentioned, where you'll be writing your triggers using an Apex code, Visual Force page, right, and Visual Force component, then Lightning, right? So we will deal only with Apex class today, and then you can open your Apex existing class from here. You can search for a content in the file using search in file, which is a very handy option. Then you can debug. We'll be talking about open execute anonymous window option where you can test and run your code, right? Very handy option. Then you have, when you want to write a test case, these are very handy options as well. And then there's a workspace. You can create your own workspace using the workspace. I'll show you about workspace when 2 or 3 developers are working on a developer console using it. Let's say you are sharing your Salesforce org, right? And let's say for whatever reason, right, you share the same username and password. Well, for a general development purpose among a development team, right? You're working on a client sandbox and they have given you a common username and password. So and you have decided to work on a certain piece of functionality, right? So Workspace Manager will be very handy, where you can have your own workspace, right? So these are help documentation. Okay. The first thing first, let's create an Apex class. So when you go here, so you go to Apex class, give a name. So demo1. Okay. So this is how you get in Apex. But they give you a very basic skeleton structure, right? The demo1. And you might wonder why my screen is black, right? So I've changed the preference. So you can do that using going to help preference, right? And editor theme, you can change to whatever you want. Say you want it to Cobalt, right? You can change it there. Let's keep it Cobalt, right? So this is a class. So I presume everyone knows what class means, right? And then we can write a method here. So we have different data types in Apex. We have booleans, that's for yes and no. We have string, right? We have integer, we have decimals, we have date, we have S objects like in accounts or any kind of custom or standard object will associated with S object, right? Or any record associated with that object will be associated with the S object, right? I'll show you what I meant by that. And then we have collections. Collections is very handy. Collections are very powerful. And we have lists, we have maps, right? And we have IDs, sets, which will store unique IDs, right? As far as the library is concerned, Apex library is quite smaller compared to .NET framework, right? Or if you're someone from Java or if you're from Python. I haven't used much Python. I've used bits and pieces when I was doing something for natural language processing. So I use the existing libraries to do that. But so okay, that's a different topic altogether. Sorry, I digress. That being said, right? So we have methods here where you can write your code, and you can create an object, right? So instance of a class, right? So I won't be talking too much about the nitty-gritty stuff or what a class and object means. I expect you to know what class means, right? So the data type, the way you can declare a variable, right? So you can write private string, right? Test, right? Okay, so you can do, let's say, name, right? Okay, and so you can even write a constructor for this class, right? Public void one, right? So you can, if you wanted to populate the constructor, something like that. Okay, it's so a name, just to make it. Okay, so we're gonna go name equals to a name. Right. So this is like I'm writing a constructor for this class. So, and we have static method. You know what static, right? You don't have to create an instance, right? When you're writing a static method. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's say I create a method here. I'm doing very basic operation today. I won't be covering what triggers are, how to write a triggers. We will cover that in detail. I just wanted to make you guys comfortable what Apex looks like and all the stuff. Hey, one more thing. You just noticed what I did, right? I can minimize and maximize using this option here, right? It's pretty handy. So, and I'm gonna do static display. So static void display, right? And these are public. These are access modifiers. You have public, private. You have global, right? So we will do a basic operation. This system.debug. This will create a debug log and say hello world, right? Every programming language start with that, right? Okay, and then we create another one which is non-static. I'll show you the difference, what I meant by that. I hope you all guys knows the difference between static and non-static, but either way, hello world again, right? Okay. All right. So we have different data type. As I said, we have Boolean, right? We have date, we have subjects, right? And we have list. These are the collections. So this is how you write a list. Let's say a list of string, right? Test equals to new list of. This is how you write. You can have list of whatever you want. List of an object. Sorry. You can have list of let's say private. Just a second. So you can have list of custom object. You can have list of standard object. You can have, say, what I mean by that is, let's say, a list of. You remember I created a object called beer or something, right? So let's go to Object Manager, and let's take one custom object, right? So beer sold, right? So you take this API names. I'll have to tell you guys about any API names and then field names, why it's important. And there's a difference. We don't use, let me finish this and I'll explain to you that. New list. Right. So as you can see, you can have any data type you want here. You can have custom object. You can have standard object, right? And let's save it. Let's see if it saves. If not, then we'll find out why it's not saving. Okay, so when you do Control S, right, you'll see that there won't be, if there is an issue, right, you can see it here under problem. It will display if there are any compilation issue or syntax error or whatever, right? It'll show you there. If not, then you will see nothing. So that means it's saved. And you can see some asterisk at the top here as well. If it's, say, for instance, let me do some change, right? See, that means this file is in edit mode. You need to save it, so right. So when I do Control S, you can see it's saving, and it's saved, right? Pretty handy. So okay. So what I was talking about, the beer sold API name, right? So API names are very important, right? We don't care about the labels. It's not important. So if you wanted to do any kind of SOQL query, or if you wanted to use an object, a field, or a field of an object, right? Say, for instance, I would like to use what's it called, log C, right? So the way I do it, I will have to use this name, log_C. It has to be unique, right? We don't care about the logs because these are the field level. You can put whatever you want. So our main area of interest is this one. So this, you have to pay very special attention. So if you are referring to a field of an object, right, you need to make sure that you use the API names, not this field label. Otherwise, you will get a compilation error, right? Okay, sounds good. So what we done, so we have list, right? We have then sets. Sets often store, not often, it stores only unique values. So set of ID, right? So ID list, ID set equals to new ID, right? So this, if you wanted to store a unique ID list or unique information, then list of unique, then you can do set, right? Then we have maps. That's like a dictionary. What do you call it in C# we call that T dictionary. And so its map is like a key value pair, right? So let me show you what I mean by that. So this is your string and this is your string. Map well equals to new map. I use map a lot. A lot means I mean recently I'm working on a project where I've extensively used the map, and right, and one of my coworkers said, "Oh wow, that's so much of maps." Right. Okay. So I mean, that was because I wanted to do something for collections. So like, you know, we're getting some information from API. So it was like like complex XML, nested XML. So I mean, I have to put everything in the map. So, you know, different sets of, you know, map of maps I have to use. So, you know, so that I don't have to query any database or anything. I just use the maps to loop through, and, you know, so yeah. Right, so I won't get into details of that. Sorry about that. So the map, if you wanted to have a key value pair like name, your name, first name, you know, first name is a key, and this one is the value. So David, say the name, and the last name, say Muller. So you put the key as the last name, and so you need to have unique keys here, right? If you put the duplicate, it will complain. So the maps are very handy. It's amazing data structure. You can use it. So I presume you guys know a bit about data structure, right? So I mean, if not, I mean, it's worth checking out, right? Right. Okay. So these are the collections which we'll be using most of the time, right? You can even get the data from a SOCL and load it to collection straight away. You can do that to list as well. Collections are very handy if you wanted to avoid SOCL queries. We will be talking about bulk update of a record using a list. So that's something I'm going to cover in the coming lectures, right? These are the data types. I just wanted to show you guys, you know, and collections are very important. So what we're going to do, we're going to keep this here, right? So we have a basic class where we have one static method and one non-static method, right? Now, let's see how to test it, right? Because writing classes, if you're coming from a C# background, you might expect, oh, let me put a breakpoint and let me debug, right? That doesn't work here because you have to understand that it's very different to your normal C# or your Java debugging, because it runs in a cloud, right? And imagine if everyone debugs it, the performance will go for a toss, right? Do you really want that? I mean, Salesforce, that's one of the, I'm not sure if it's a drawback or, I mean, if you're coming from a C# background, you might find, oh, yuck, you will say that, literally. When I first started Salesforce, right? I mean, I've been coding on C# for years. So when when I started Salesforce and I look, what the heck? I can't debug it. Why is that, you know, the F11 not working? I mean, just give me an example. Why I can't step in? What can't I do that? I mean, it's different. You know, you have to understand. And you have to appreciate it at the same time, right? Because it's in cloud, right? It gets compiled in the cloud. And right? So when you imagine if they give you an option to everyone to step through the code, and, you know, different in a million users doing that, it's just gonna make the Salesforce cry the platform. it's not really efficient, right? So because being a multi-tenant architecture, so it's there's nothing bad about it. I mean, you get used to it. When you get used to it, you actually love it, right? Okay, so this is enough of philosophical talk about programming, right? So okay, so we have saved this class. So let's see how to test it. The way to test it, let's go to edit, right? Go to debug, and you have this. This is an old code which I've written for one of the sessions, if you remember. So go to debug and open execute anonymous window, right? There, this is where you write your code for testing. So we're gonna write the class name first, demo1, and we're gonna deal with the static first, right? And I'm gonna show you what happens, right? And let's execute. So please make sure you tick this so that it can generate a code. Okay, so you can see there are a lot of noise here, right? I mean, I'm not interested in any of this. You can, I mean, it's very good to know if you wanted to know what all this information means, but I mean, but if I'm only interested in my log message, so you can go to debug only. It will show you hello world, right? And if I wanted to see the execution of the code, what you can do, you go to switch perspective, right? Here, and all predefined. And you see, it will actually, if you click on here, it will show you the line of code that's running. Let me make it here. I mean, I often find this annoying. Okay. Now, let's see. It will show you what line of code is running. This is your execution tree, call stack, right? And so it's pretty much show you the part of the code which is running, and see, this is actually shows you here on the right hand side, right, where it is running and what kind of code is running. So debug wall, see, this is what is running, right? And it shows you that this is running here. So these are very handy. I mean, I use it most of the time when I have to look into log file to see if for any sort of error, right? So this is very handy for me. So another option which I really like, as I mentioned to you, I'll get into that. Let me try the non-static one, right, to show what happens. Just to, let's see if it works, right? Okay, right. It cannot be referenced from a static context because you can't run this code. So you're referring class dot. That's not how a non-static method works, right? So to make a non-static method work, so you need to do demo1 d equals to new demo one. So you're gonna write create an object, right? And then you do d. So, and there you go. So you write that, and you go to the debug log, and hello world. So that's the difference. So it depends upon the context where you should be writing static and non-static, right? So please read about, if you don't understand, what is static, what is non-static, but please go through the Apex documentation, which is very handy. I'll put the link below, so for your reference. Okay, so now we talked about the workspace, right? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go to Workspace Manager, right? And let's say I wanted to do a new, let's say, demo1. Right, okay, so see, you have a different workspace altogether. So let me, so what happens is that, let's say someone else is working on a different project right here, and let's say, let me create another class here. Let's say demo2, right? And so I'll save it. Let's say two developers working on a similar org using a developer console, a different project, so they can use the workspace to do their individual work, right? For instance, I don't want to see this demo2, right? I'm interested to look at my demo1 code. So what I can do, I can go to Workspace, right? I can go to Workspace Manager, and I can switch it to, it brings back my, right? And if someone wants to do their work on the other one, they can go there, and so that you don't actually accidentally close the tab of other people work, right? So it's very handy if you're, you know what I'm talking about. If you are comfortable using, as I said, um, Visual Studio Code, go for that. Your own environment, right? Okay, so we have something called test. So one thing you have to understand in Salesforce, right? Writing an Apex code is great, but you need to write a test class, right? And if you can't deploy your code to production if you don't have a test class with a code coverage of 75% and above, right? So if you write a test class and your code, so for whatever reason, say hit 60%, you can't deploy your code. It will not let you deploy. There are different ways to deploy the code, right? You can use the chain set in Salesforce, or you can use another software called GearSet. We use GearSet. We're very handy. Highly recommend because the team loves it. So, okay, and it's great. It's very user friendly as well. Okay, right. So, and another thing is that about the tests, there you need to understand one thing, right? You can write everything from the scratch, the test data, or you can rely on your production data to run the test. It won't impact your production data, but imagine if you have a complex business objects, right, and you have 50 different objects linked to it. It is a nightmare to write a test data for that, dummy object, and populate the data. So you can use see all data. It will see the underlying data. If it's in production, it will see the underlying production data, and will try to run a test without impacting your data. So I will cover the test class in a coming lectures, right? We need to go through a lot about the test classes and to show you the things and whatnot. Today is not the day, because today is just to give you an Apex introduction, just to give you an idea about what an Apex looks like. So as you can see, the syntax is pretty much similar to Java, or you can also say like similar to C#, right? So yeah, I mean, and this is pretty much I wanted to cover today. If you guys have any comments, or if you guys have any questions, please feel free to write it in the comment box, right? I will try to respond, and please make sure that you read the documentation. The thing is that I just wanted to be very honest with you. If you're someone who had never done programming, then I'm afraid a platform dev certification is not for you. You're not ready yet. I mean, you will be ready once you get enough experience. But if you have no programming experience, I will not recommend you to go and take platform dev certification, because chances of failing will be very high in this case, because you need to understand a programming concept. You need to have a programming mind, right? You need to programming is not difficult. I mean, let me say that it's the syntax is not difficult. I mean, you can pick up any syntax. It's just to put everything together and understand the business logic. That's where it takes time, right? It comes with experience, right? I've been programming for almost 15 years, right? I've been programming in different languages, so I'm quite comfortable with programming languages. I mean, any programming languages in the world, right? So if you're someone who's been programming on a say COBOL, right? Which is very popular back in the days, and before my days, and during my dad's generation. So it's like you will find it very interesting when you do Apex. It will be a bit difficult, not difficult. It will be a bit different. I'm sorry, I don't want to use the word difficult. There's no such thing called difficult. It's a different level of challenges based on your individual understanding of certain things, right? So yeah, it would be very interesting, because I had a look at COBOL and I like, oh no, I'll prefer not to code, right? So yeah, sorry, Doug, I just wanted to give you context, right? If you're not someone who has never done programming, it's a great time to start, right? So Apex will get you there. Apex is a very beautiful language. It's easy, user friendly. You will find it home, right? Okay. So that's all I wanted to cover today. I hope you have an amazing Friday, wherever you are. Greetings from New Zealand, Have a great day. Bye.